There you go. Great. Thanks everyone for your patience, and we're going to get started now with our collaborate for assessment 1B. And welcome to Dani and Kathy and Helen, who'll be helping present tonight and answering the questions in our chat box. Okay, thanks Helen. Thanks Helen for getting the slides back up for us. Okay, so our assessment 1B is due on Monday the 4th of September, which is in week 8. So the essay is 2,000 words in length. So it's double the length of our first assessment, which means that we're going to provide a little bit more depth, or a lot more depth and detail in our explanations. You're going to be required to write an academic essay on how education is changing in the 21st century. You'll be able to use your first assessment, your first essay, to inform this essay. So you can use chunks of your essay, or you can use all of it, take on the feedback and improve areas, and then use those ideas and the parts that you've already completed as a base to continue your explanation about education in the 21st century. So for this second essay, there's 2 new outcomes that we're covering. The first essay covered 2 outcomes, and now we're adding on these extra 2, which you can see in the red. So you're also going to be comparing and contrasting traditional teaching and learning practice with new learning practices. And you're also going to explain how curriculum and pedagogy is changing in the 21st century. So we are looking for knowledge and understanding of the key concepts. And so they are the concepts that we covered in the first essay. We're also looking for depth and breadth of discussion and analysis. So in this section, we would like to see you expanding on your ideas from the first essay. And we'd also like to see some further research. So for your first essay, we said that there was a minimum of 3 references that could be included in your essay. This time we're looking for a few more. Yeah, I think it will come up later in the presentation tonight, and we'll talk about how many references would be suitable, and also we'll give you some tips on where to go looking for some extra references. And we're also looking for academic expression and referencing. And I know that's an area that a lot of you have highlighted that it's something you'd like to improve on. So this essay is worth 40% of your mark. So make sure you take on that feedback from the first essay and improve the areas that you need to improve, and really make a really good go of it, because it's a fair chunk of your mark for this unit. So that's just an overview of this essay. And for the remainder of this collaborate, we're going to just have an opportunity to workshop some ideas and some strategies. You're going to take a bit of time to reflect back on your first essay and how that will help you to improve for your second essay, and get some tips and ideas from other people in our group here tonight. For the second part of our session tonight, Dani will be taking you through the structure of your essay, and we'll really get down to the finer details of the referencing and where to go for some support for your referencing or for extra ideas for your research, and also what to put into each section of the essay. So let's get started. Have we had any questions yet, or are we happy just to move on? Okay, great. Thanks, Helen. Okay, so here we have our 2 stars and a wish. This is a really great strategy. If you want to take on some strategies that you could use in the classroom, this is a great way to reflect back on any work that's been completed and think about things that you've done well, so they are the stars, and something that you would like to improve, which is the wish. So just take a moment, everyone, and jot down some things in the stars of what you think you did well in the first essay, and what's something that you would like to focus on for your next essay. That's right, Dani. Thanks for pointing that out. This is actually a really useful thing for actually when you're teaching as well. It actually lets a teacher see what are some of the areas that we need to focus on for future lessons. So I know Dani uses this when she's teaching, and we also use it in the class that I teach. And any of the wishes that come up, we think, okay, well, that's what this group would like to focus on, and we then take like a small group and focus on those particular areas with them. So it's a really great strategy, and it's also really useful for those students who don't always speak up in class. Okay, so we've got it's great to see we've got lots of things that we've done well. So we've got that we've done a lot of research, excellent, covered the concepts, organising your ideas, that's really important, isn't it? Just to get that really great flow to the essay and the essay structure, excellent. Included good definitions, well done. The academic language, very important. And comparing the strategies, well done. So things that we would like to focus on, more research, great. And that's a good one because we'll hold on to that as well for later in the session as well. I think that's an area that a lot of people are finding that they'd like a little bit of extra assistance with that. So it's good. Writing with the limited word count. Yes, it can be very difficult. At least with the next one, it's the 2,000 words. So it'll give you that bit of extra, scope to express all the detail that you understand, be able to express fully what you understand. Great. And another focus is linking the paragraphs and adding more detail. Definitely. I actually found that when I was writing essays too, I found that quite difficult, getting that good link between the different sections of an essay. And it is a skill that we do have to develop just to get that really good flow to an essay. Okay, well done, everyone. Excellent. It's really good to reflect back too on our work rather than just completing an essay and then just moving on to the next one, because this is how we learn, really, isn't it? Once we reflect back and think that's the area I need to improve on, and then taking some steps to actually go ahead and do that. This is really useful, I think. Okay, let's have a look at the next slide. So here we're going to expand on our ideas about 20th and 21st century teaching and learning. And in this bubble here, we'd like you to pop down some ways that you can create depth in your discussion and expand on your ideas. So what are some of the strategies that you use, or what are some of the ways that you were able to expand on your ideas when you were writing, and what resources can you use to help you? Yeah, I agree, Lauren. Because this is, reflecting back on your learning is exactly what we're asking students to do. Particularly these days, it just becomes integrated into most of our teaching and learning. It's all about, that's just learning in a nutshell. So it's great that as pre-service teachers, you're able to put that into practice for yourselves. So has anyone got any ideas for how they can create depth in their discussion? Yeah, great. So further researching the ideas. Excellent. So not just sticking to the readings are great that you've been provided with, But then if you think, well, I could actually add some more detail around this idea, then that's your opportunity to go and research that area further. Excellent. Yeah, discussion on the discussion board, asking questions from your other group members. Absolutely. Yeah, so you can ask us as well, but probably the discussion board would be your first stop. If you're finding that you're struggling to add some depth, you could certainly put that out on the board and see what other students respond and give you some ideas about what they've done. Yes, and using some examples to illustrate the ideas. That's actually something in the really good writing, they used those really specific examples to illustrate the topic idea that they had. It's so important because it just gives that extra, almost real life example and just makes it really clear for the reader. Excellent. Analyze the ideas rather than just describe them. And that's it. It's just getting down to the specifics. Yes, and comparing. And the weekly learning materials, yes, and also the weekly activities can be really useful as well to expanding your ideas, because often when someone shares something, it might be something that you've never considered. Okay, so we've got a question here. How do you use an example if you need to reference? So an example is just something that's becoming more specific. So if you were writing about technology being beneficial to learning, you wouldn't just stop there. So an example then would be that using technology is encouraging students to be more critical in their thinking because they have to decide if the information they're reading online is from a trusted source. So that would be a more specific example, but you would then be able to reference the critical thinking as one of the 4 C's. Does that make sense? We've also got using Google Scholar and sharing resources via the discussion board. Excellent idea. Google Scholar is actually really useful. Sometimes if you just do a simple Google search, if you're looking for some extra information about a particular topic, you might stumble across some blogs which really do have great ideas, but they're not always based in research. Often it's someone's opinion. And so if you use Google Scholar, they are usually peer-reviewed or research articles, academic articles. So it's actually a very good resource to use. Okay, I think we've got lots of great ideas there. Well done, everyone. And continue to share these ideas on our discussion board as well. And if you find that you're still stuck in a certain area, please go and ask on the discussion board. Okay, I'm just going to wait. Dani's just asking here if Kathy's going to grab a screenshot of this, just so then we can share that on our boards. Excellent, thanks, Kathy. Okay, so we'll move to the next one now. Okay, so here we're going to expand on our ideas about globalisation and social change. So in your next essay, so in assessment 1B, you're going to explain or use 3 key factors that are driving change in education. So we have globalisation and social change, which you have elaborated on in your first essay. But in this essay, you're going to need to add in another key factor. So we thought it'd be great to brainstorm some ideas here. we can get down to the specifics of globalisation. So when you discuss how globalisation is a driving change in education, what are the specific aspects that you might discuss? And the same for social change. And then after that, what would be your third area that you would consider is a driving change in education? Do we have any takers to get started? Oh, yes, we do. Technology. Fantastic. Yeah, and ICT. Competition. It's an interesting one. That's good. Would that come under... I know there was quite a few people who discussed competition as part of globalisation. Okay, yeah, and for the social change, we've got the sustainable education, well done, and cultural diversity. Well done. And in that third star, if you can think of any other areas that you might consider as another factor driving change in education, pop it in there. Yeah, so we've got environmental sustainability. Excellent, very interesting. That is actually becoming quite a key topic as well in education at the moment. And in the social change, the interactions between teachers and students. So I guess for that one, we could say, we say the interpersonal relationships, I guess, and that comes under social change. And I guess there too, you could link that to the change in pedagogy, in that the teacher is no longer the leader of the class and the giver of the knowledge. They are now more in partnership with students and, as we say, the guide on the side. Excellent. Okay, I can see for one of the third key factors, we've got the different jobs being created. So that would be linked to that uncertainty for the future of we don't quite know the job market of the future. So we need to focus on skills rather than just a pure knowledge base. Dani, you would like to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I thought while everyone's still busy talking, I'd just mention a couple of important points about this because it was something that came up a lot in 1A for me with my marking. There was a lot of overlap, and you will find that there will be overlap with these three key factors. But what we really want you to do is to show your depth of understanding by trying to choose three really different aspects that are driving change and to make sure you link those back to the whole concept of education. Because one thing I found, there was lots of great discussion on issues to do with cultural change in society and increased multiculturalism in Australia, but then there was no link back to education. So you told me all the stats about Australia's changing population and then didn't link it back to education. So make sure any of these points that you pick, that you link it back to education and try and choose three really different ones so you can show just how much you know. If you do globalisation and bits of technology, then you do social change and change in technology, and then you choose technology for your third factor, all you're showing us is a really limited understanding that technology is a big issue in 21st century teaching and learning. You haven't really shown us that depth. So that would be two things to consider there. One, choose your factors carefully and make sure they show a breadth of understanding. And secondly, link all three of them back to education. Hope that's okay.
That's excellent, Dani. Thanks so much. That makes it really clear. And yeah, it is so important to make sure that you are showing the diverse scope of your knowledge. So yeah, again, I'll just reiterate what Dani has said. Yeah, please don't focus just on one thing, but there will be the overlap as well. So it doesn't mean that, technology can only be discussed as something that's not globalisation. Well, globalisation, technology is a part of globalisation as well. So thanks, Dani. That's excellent. Really cleared that up probably for a lot of people, I think. And how are we going with our answers here? I think we've probably exhausted our answers here. Can we get a screenshot of that, Kathy? Thank you. Excellent. Okay, let's move along. So now we're going to brainstorm some ideas for another section of your essay that will come up, and that is the comparison between the traditional and the new teaching practices. So here we want to explain how our curriculum and pedagogy are changing, and in your essay you're going to do that by comparing traditional and new teaching practices. So let's get some ideas of what are some of the traditional teaching practices. So, and when we say traditional, we're thinking around the 20th century type of practices. And what are some of the 21st century or the new teaching practices? And here you might like to draw on some of your ideas that you popped into your first essay. Because I know in the comparison, a lot of you really came up with some really specific examples of the difference between 20th and 21st century teaching and learning. Excellent. So far we've got some really good responses. The memorization of facts. Teacher's job was just to impart knowledge. Well done. Yes, and the student's job is to withhold that knowledge until it is needed. Excellent. There wasn't really a whole lot of collaboration and sharing of ideas. And all learning is the same, that's right. The student must fit into the curriculum. Well done. Behaviourism. Yes, and it was a transmissionist style. Yes, it was influenced by the industrial age, that's right. So it was more like a production line, just, pop the knowledge into their head and move them along. Well done. Excellent. And also, the curriculum was very fragmented, so there wasn't a whole lot of integration across key learning areas. It very much had, this was English time. We did reading and then we did writing. You might have done spelling and then some grammar. And then you had your maths time. There wasn't that idea that there could have been a bigger picture to the learning and that you could integrate a whole lot of learning areas just through the one key idea. So in the 21st century learning or the new teaching practices, we've got collaboration groups, that's right. The use of technology, it's very much a constructivist view of learning. Problem solving in the 4 C's, active learning, and the teacher-student relationship has become it's always been important, but I think now the role has changed. Yes, so the teachers and the learners work in a partnership, really, to individualise. Yes, there's a heavy focus on goal setting and consistent feedback and also timely feedback as well. It's gaining a lot of momentum at the moment too. So that really helps that learning become individualised. Yes, and the students have a say in their learning. Peer learning is very important too. So I actually have a little anecdote about that from my class where I had one student who came up and said, oh, so-and-so is stealing my ideas. I wrote this down and now he's stealing it and he made it sound better. And some of the kids actually had a good laugh at that in our class because a few of them spoke up and said, there's no such thing as stealing ideas. We all learn from each other. So we're quite proud as teachers that some of our students spoke up and actually said that idea is shifting, that is not just knowledge that you have, it's that we can share with each other, and then we build our own learning from that. And up the top there, we've got some achievable goals. Excellent. Okay, and we've had some more popping to the traditional way of teaching. I like that one at the start, the silence, the teacher is talking. Absolutely right. It was very much, there wasn't much student talk in the traditional teaching methods, and the teacher really was seen as the leader of the group. But I think these days there's more focus on that collaboration and the ideas from students as being held quite highly as well. Okay. I think there's just a couple more going in here. That's right, Helen, the collectively created knowledge. It's a really great way to put it. We just had pop in there that learning can be fun. Yes, Dani, just like our collaborate sessions, as ELAs at any time, even if one person's presenting, that anyone can pop in and share the ideas as well. It's good. It's not good just to have one person's point of view ever. It's sometimes it'd be quite interesting to think back to the way that we used to learn. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, in your essay, you are going to have to explain why it is important for education to change. So why is it important to have that shift from the traditional teaching and learning methods to the new practices? So let's brainstorm some ideas here about some of the teaching practices that are relevant to the 21st century that you might like to add into your essay and use in your discussion to emphasize that point. So when you, and then you can circle which one you will discuss in your essay, because when you have that teaching practice that you'd like to focus on, you can use that to support your discussion around why it's important for education to change. So let's get some ideas down here. Okay, so if we've got some research showing that students are no longer able to critically think and are less creative, so it's important then for education to change. And so what is a teaching practice that would then develop that critical thinking and creative thinking in students? And employers are looking for skills such as collaboration. Excellent. So in your essay, you would use some of these examples, such as students having difficulty to critically think and are less creative, or you might like to take the angle that employers will be looking for skills such as collaboration, and children need to construct their knowledge based on their experiences. So what are some of the teaching practices? What's the pedagogy that is going to develop those skills? I think we mentioned some of them in the previous slide. Someone mentioned the peer learning. So peer learning will really help those collaboration skills. Intentional teaching, fantastic. Inquiry-based learning, yes. Goal-based learning, excellent. Is that really is going to have those students thinking critically? Great, and also the collaborative learning as well. more project work. Yeah, so there's project-based learning as well. Focus on research skills and the skill development, especially in technology as well. Okay, and we've got there another reason for why it's important for education to change is the need to motivate and encourage passion, creativity, and interest. Excellent, and focusing on the process rather than the result. Well done. That's absolutely true. And in that, you would have the skills around the feedback and that critical thinking and creative thinking as well as in thinking, how can I do this differently next time? So it's not about just getting that one result, it's about improving your learning as you go along. Okay, so we've got someone now who's circling what they're going to discuss in their essay. Excellent, well done. So when you come to this part, it's really important to have that clear idea of why it is important for education to change, have the research to support that, and then also support your discussion there with the pedagogy. So in what way can the new teaching practice of the 21st century allow that change? How is it going to develop that change in education? And don't forget to always be linking back to that focus of the assessment. And the focus of the assessment is how education is changing. So we'd really be looking for you to link back to those 21st century skills for this one in that pedagogical practice that you choose. So if you choose inquiry-based learning to bring about a change in the way that students think, you would then link that to those ideas about the 4 C's or the greater use of collaboration. Yes, that's right, Helen. So always make sure you connect back to the rubric, as well as we do have some really useful guides for you. Dani's going to take us through that very shortly. Make sure you use all of these resources that we're going through for you. They'll become really useful. And when we take the screenshots of these and pop them into our discussion boards, refer back to them. If you're stuck for an idea, we've got lots of ideas here. Perfect example of our 21st century learning in practice. Okay, Kathy, we've got a screenshot of that one. Okay, thanks. So that's our workshopping around some of the ideas that we can use to inform our essay and some of the key factors that we might be discussing in our essay. And Dani's going to take us through the actual essay structure. So I'm going to hand over to Dani now.
Thanks, Nyree. Can everyone hear me just as a quick check? Yep. Okay, great. All right, I'm here tonight to go through the essay structure because we've spent the first half of the session going through the content aspect, and that's one part of your essay. But the other part that I think is really, really important is the structure, because this is how you're going to communicate your ideas. And there's a really big difference between those essays that flow well, that present a cohesive discussion that addresses the question, and those that are simply listing points and have shown that they've got some good research and understand some of the key ideas, but they're just not put together particularly effectively. So I think from 1A, we really want to see that improvement in how you're going to put together your thoughts, structure your response, and present it to us. So once you've done your research, that's the first part. You then really need to spend some time working on each section of your essay and putting it all together. And we've been sharing some extra resources. I know that there's some resources coming out about how to write an introduction. I'm also going to share some on how to use comparative language to try and get your analysis level up a little bit. So all of the ELAs are really putting in some effort to try and give you some extra resources to take your writing to that next level. So one thing that we've put together is this essay guide, and you'll find this in the 1B thread on our discussion board. And what we've tried to do is to put a bit of structure together for you so you can see how your essay should look. So it's exactly the same format as 1A. It's just we need a little bit of extra detail, extra elaboration, and there are some extra topics. So I know this question's come up a fair bit on discussion boards and in our chat room. Can you take your 1A essay and use most of that and then just add a couple of things? The answer is really no. You can't just take your basis of 1A and then add a few extra points to it. There's so much more, as you could see from what Nyree went through, that if you did that, you would only just maybe scrape through with the pass, because we've got so much more that we want to see you do. There's so much more in the word count. You can, by all means, take some of the information from your 1A essay and include that into your 1B essay. For example, your definition of globalisation or social change, some of your characteristics on 20th and 21st century teaching and learning. You've already done the research on that, which is why we had 1A in the first place. But please don't just add a couple of extra paragraphs to 1A, because you're going to come unstuck with that. So what we've tried to do in this essay guide is give you a bit of a breakdown on the word count, because I know lots of you find that really useful. But don't get stuck with this. If you happen to do a little bit more on one part and a little bit less on another, that's fine. As long as you're addressing the criteria, it doesn't really matter. But what we've tried to do is give you an outline here. So your intro shouldn't be any more than about 200 words for an essay of this length. If it is more than that, then you're starting to eat into your elaboration and discussion points. Same with your conclusion. What we've tried to do here is break it down into the sections of the essay details. So the main body 1 is demonstrating an understanding of 21st century teaching and learning, around 400 to 500 words. You might find that takes a few paragraphs. You might be able to smash it out in one. It depends how succinct you are with your writing. Body 2 is where you're going to identify and discuss the top 3 key factors that are driving change, including globalisation and social change. And the other example we've given here is technology, but that third example is completely up to you. You will most probably find you need to break that down into 3 separate paragraphs. Okay, so by saying body 2, we're not saying paragraph 2 of the main body. We're suggesting this is the second section of your main body. And the third section then is looking at how curriculum and pedagogy are changing by comparing the traditional and new. And then the factors which drive change in education have been included in that. And then discuss why it's important for education to change, looking at the new practice, which was the previous slide that we focused on. Okay, so this is the suggested order, simply because this follows the assessment details and assessment outline. Of course, you can play around with that if you like, but really we're suggesting this particularly if you find essays challenging. This just gives you a good starting point. Okay, so are there any questions? Because I'm going to break it down and I'm really conscious of time, given we've only got about 20 minutes left. I don't want to spend too much more time on this unless we've got any questions. I'd rather just break it down into each of the sections, because I think that's going to be more important. Okay, alrighty, I will move on then. Okay, what I really wanted to get you to have a think about is some areas that you can improve in each of the parts of the essay. So your intro, body and conclusion, and your ELAs would have given you feedback in each of these sections. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to have a think about what it is that you might need to work on, and then I'm going to take each section and break it down on some common feedback that we presented, because we've all the ELAs have sat down and had a chat about what it is that we found pretty much common ground were areas that you would need to consider for the next assessment to improve. So I'll go through some of those so you get some feedback which acts as feed forward for your next assessment. So I'll give you a minute or so. Great. Okay, I'll start with the introduction while we're still writing, because I think the body is going to be where we've got some key issues to go through. The introduction really needs to set the scene for your essay. So you need to make sure that you're providing a clear structure as to what the rest of the essay is going to discuss. By reading your introduction, I should be able to sit back and go, okay, so they're going to go through X, Y, and Z, and then I'm going to then spend some time reading through your main body, elaborating on that. One of the key things that is important with this essay is we actually have an essay question that you will need to keep referring back to. So it's pretty simple. It's how is education changing in the 21st century? What are the key factors driving change in education, and what is their impact on teaching and learning in the 21st century? Basically, that is your introduction. You should be aiming to use the phrasing from the essay question to base your introduction. Okay, so you should be using phrasing like education is changing in the 21st century because of, and then you can go through some of your points. 3 key factors that are driving change in education are, and you start linking those down. Okay, so we need to see you making a connection back to that essay question, because that's what your essay needs to address. Some key points. Try and avoid using in this essay, simply because it drops that formal tone of your writing. If you can't avoid it, that's fine, but just state your points. So rather than say, in this essay, these points will be discussed, just say the points that will be discussed, because it will really raise that formal academic tone to your writing. And someone's already said that. Without saying, this is what I'm going to cover, how do you write it? That's how you do it. So you restate, instead of saying this is what will be discussed, just cross that bit out and then start from the rest of your sentence. The 3 key factors will be discussed. Something to consider is your thesis statement, which technically goes at the end of your introduction, but it can be somewhere else. And really, your thesis statement should smash out the focus of your essay. So it should include all the key points that you're going to discuss. So basically, go back to the dot points on the assessment details and list those. And in particular, identify which 3 factors, identify the practice that you're going to discuss. So make it super clear what it is that the essay is going to discuss. Intros are really hard, simply because you should only spend a couple of 100 words in an essay of this size on it. So you've got to be clear, succinct, no waffle. You want to try and grab your reader's attention, so you want to be straight to the point. Okay. One thing to consider, avoid including source support, so avoid the in-text references if you can, because what that tends to do is lead to you starting your discussion. The intro shouldn't start the discussion should come in the main body. So really try and avoid that as much as possible. I'm going to drop down to the conclusion, because it's pretty similar to the intro, in that you want to restate those main points that you have already made. You want to link back to the essay question and make sure you're answering that question. So in your conclusion, we should see how you've identified education as changing in the 21st century. We should be able to see which factors you've identified as leading to that change and the new practice with the teaching and learning. Okay. Again, avoid any source support in that, because you're starting to introduce new concepts and new ideas, and your conclusion should just be a summary. So rather than introduce new thoughts, save them for your main body. Okay, there's a bit of thought out there that you should write your main body first and then come back and do your intro and conclusion later. Some people find this a really good solution because they then know what it is that the essay's discussed. I tend to find I like to have all my dot points for my intro listed, and then I kind of repeat those dot points for my conclusion, and then I go to my main body. Once I've done that, I then know approximately how many words I've got left to play with, so I can then hit out my introduction. It really does depend on how you work. I think it's important to know where you want to take your essay before you start writing, but really it is a personal preference. Okay, I know that at the end, once I have written my essay, I check in my intro, are all the main points I've mentioned in my body mentioned in my intro, and then have I revisited them in my conclusion. If you've done that, then you should have a fairly cohesive and succinct essay. Okay, if for some reason there's a point missing, make sure it goes back into your intro and your conclusion. Okay, some other things then in terms of the main body. Topic sentences, so important because they guide your reader. They tell you what the next paragraph is going to be about. And if you have a look at the assessment details, you've got a lot of key ideas on how to sort out your topic sentences. So the first dot point is demonstrate an understanding of 21st century teaching and learning. So reword that into your topic sentence. Okay, that should really be where you start off. 21st century teaching and learning, blah, blah, blah. And you can start discussing the points you want to there. I know I mentioned this in the first collab that we had on 1A, but this is something I do with every essay that I mark. I read the intro, I read every topic sentence and I scroll down, and then I read the conclusion. I then sit back and say to myself, have I got a good idea what this essay is going to be about? If I do, I get a really strong feeling from the essay that it's going to be clear and it's going to have a logical progression of thoughts. If I get to the conclusion and I think, I've got no idea what this essay is about, then I know that the essay is not going to be structured as effectively as it could be. Okay, so consider that. Once you've written your essay, spend a little bit of time going through and reading it just like that. If you've done that, then you're on the way to doing really well and having communicated your thoughts effectively. So your topic sentence is crucial for setting that scene for the rest of your paragraph. The linking sentence is just as important, so that's your final sentence in each paragraph. Now your linking sentence needs to do two functions. It needs to link the paragraph you're writing to the next paragraph, and it also needs to try and make some link back to the essay topic. So I can see you revisiting that essay topic. So how does that relate to how education's changing in the 21st century? How does it relate to the key factors that are changing education? Okay, so really focus on strong topic sentences, strong linking sentences, and use the rest of your paragraph to really flesh out the main ideas. Are there any questions that I might have missed from the chat room, or shall I move on? I think I might move on. Can we get a screen grab of that, Kathy? Awesome. Okay, so how to improve the referencing in your essay. Okay, this was something that I found either people had or they didn't really have. So I found there wasn't really a middle ground here. A lot of you really got referencing. You spent a lot of time considering where to put your references. You accessed a good range of sources, and you made sure each of your key ideas had referencing, and then others really needed to pick that up a little bit. So let's have a think about what are some things that you might be able to improve on or consider for the next essay in terms of in-text referencing and also our reference list. So if you've got any ideas, just jot them down. I know I'll get the ball rolling with the reference list. Really, really important that you use the APA guides format your reference list, because it is super easy to do once you've checked it out. There might be some that are a bit dodgy, a bit in the grey or shady area on how to do it, but really your reference list, we should see, if we've made some comments in your 1A assessment, we should see you taking those comments on board and making those adjustments, because they're just simple formatting. So things like the double spacing, things like centering the heading of the reference list, and just having references, no need for reference list, starting the reference list on a new page, using a hanging indent for the second and subsequent line of each source, making sure they're in alphabetical order according to author, accessing a range of sources, so you're not just relying on one or two. Really try and spread it out a little bit, and I'll get to how many sources, because I know that that number is crucial for a lot of you. I'll get to that in, I think it's 2 or 3 slides time. But I think formatting of the reference list, really, really important. Just go and check the student portal, find your APA guides. Absolutely, someone's got that. That's a great resource. So go and have a look, and then spend a little bit of time just getting the formatting right, because that shows that you are taking care with your presentation. It shows that you're being professional about it, because referencing and in-text referencing really does reflect the academic integrity and strength of your work. Within text referencing, a couple of common areas that we found were things like using the author's initials in the in-text reference. No need, just use their surname. Including page numbers for all direct quotes. That's really important. Okay, so they were sort of the main things in terms of the formatting. In terms of how you go about the referencing, there were some essays that had a large number of direct quotes. Now, direct quotes are great because they can clearly identify some information you want to elaborate on. But they should be the elaboration. They shouldn't actually be your point. So you should state your point first and use a direct quote to elaborate and be an example of it. Okay, there were a few essays that had direct quotes constantly through their work, which really reduces how much we can see of your understanding. So we would really like to see direct quotes reduced significantly to just a couple in your essay, and instead paraphrase the ideas. So change the direct quote into your own words, because this shows that you've not just taken something and copied it and put it into your essay in context, but it shows us that you have actually processed that information. We start to see your understanding rather than just, this is the author's idea and I'm going to put this in here because this explains it really well. Okay, so really try and paraphrase over direct quotes, reduce the number of direct quotes in your work, and access a really good range of sources. It's hard to say how many sources, and it's hard to say how many in-text references you should have in each paragraph, because some there's going to be more, some there's going to be less. The key is to make sure each of your main points has got support from a source. Okay, that way you're adding to the academic integrity and strength of your work. Okay. Any more questions or comments about referencing and the reference list? Nope. Well, if we've got our screen grab, I will move along. Okay. I am actually going to go very quickly over this one because I think that we already have a fair bit of information on spelling, grammar and expression in terms of how we can access some different sources. There are so many online resources that you can use. There's Your Tutor, there's Grammarly, there's Writer's Diet. If anyone thinks of any more, we can list them down here. But while you're doing that, I really just wanted to focus on how important it is to make sure you spell check your work. Okay, it really raises that professional tone to your writing. It adds a more formal tone, and you should be able to clearly identify your spelling errors by doing a quick spell check on it. Okay, consider the structure of your sentences as well. Make sure they flow. Make sure you've got links between all your points. to make sure that your ideas are clearly expressed, because it doesn't matter how much research you do on those first 7 slides we presented tonight. If you can't put the ideas together in a cohesive format, you're not going to be communicating those ideas effectively. So it is super, super important to check through your spelling, check through your grammar. In particular, check through the spelling of the authors. Okay, there were a few common errors. I know Bolstad was one that was spelled incorrectly. That was a big source I know a lot of you used. So make sure you're spelling the author's name correctly, because that'll just keep popping up. A lot of you spelt it correctly in your reference list and then made the error in your essay. So if you could double check your spelling, always give yourself plenty of time to edit, because you will go through it 20 times and the 21st time you'll see another major error in there. So make sure you give yourself enough time to go through and check that. And I think that's probably my biggest advice for this assessment. A lot of you are going to spend a lot of time on your research and then not spend as much time putting it together. I think you need to find a bit of a balance, because you've already done a lot of the research for 1A. You should have a lot of your points already sorted. You now need to work on how you can put those ideas into a cohesive, logical progression of thoughts that connect to the essay topic. So spelling, grammar, expression is all super important. It is a good idea to get someone else to have a read over it and see if they understand what you're talking about. If they don't, you need to go back to the editing stage and make sure that it's clear to them, okay? But proofread, edit, check, double check, and then finally submit your work. Did anyone have any more points about this? Oh, one thing I did want to mention, please, please, please use third person for your essay. Some of you slipped into first person, which really reduces that formal tone, and it starts sounding more reflective than a proper critical analysis of the essay topic. So avoid I, we, our. They were some of the big ones. There weren't too many I's, but I noticed lots of in our education system, or we should be able to, or this is something we need to do. So chop all of them out and go back to third person. Also consider no headings, no dot points. It's a formal essay, so it must be full paragraphs and full sentences. So if you find that you're running short of space, you can't just chuck in a couple of dot points and say, well, I would have liked to have spoken about all of these, but I didn't have space. That won't do you any favours. So make sure everything is in full sentences and full paragraphs. Okay, very conscious of time, so I'm going to skip through. Okay, this is really just for your information, so I'm not going to spend tons of time on this one either. This is really looking at each of the main dot points of the assessment details and focusing whereabouts in our readings you might be able to find some extra assistance or extra resources. So if you know that in 1A you only had one resource on 21st century teaching and learning, go back and have a look at the readings in week 1 and 2. Looking at globalisation and social change and the other third factor, that's focusing on weeks 2 and 3. Looking at curriculum and pedagogy, that's looking in weeks 4 and 5. And then overall, why it's important for education to change, focusing on the readings in week 5. Okay, so this is just to give you that extra source support. On top of which you just Google and then you find stuff. As we said, Google Scholar is super helpful, but this just narrows that focus down for you. So if you're missing some sources, check out the readings that we've provided for you. We do want to see you take it further, but this is a good starting point. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, this is where we've got our numbers for the references. It's so important to include more than 3 references taken from the unit readings in this essay. So that was the absolute bare basics for 1A. We're really looking for about 12 to 15 references, okay? And that's different references, not a different chapter in the same source. Okay, so make sure you're considering reading further afield than you did for 1A, because this will add that depth and academic strength to your writing. You need to include in-text references and then the reference list at the end. APA style, like we've said. And here are some good support systems that you might be able to use: your tutor, the student portal, student advisors, student coaches, and your good old ELAs and our discussion board, as well as each other. You know, referring back to these screenshots that we took tonight might just trigger something in your mind so that you think, oh, that's the direction I'm going to head with this essay. But I think really the key to this is, once you've done your research, work on your structure, because essays are tricky things. But once you understand, it's almost like a formula. Once you get that locked into your head, probably the biggest things I want you to take from my part of this session tonight is keep referring your ideas back to the essay topic. Use the phrasing from the essay topic and from the assessment details to ensure that you're connecting to the key criteria of the task. If you can do that, you'll find each paragraph links back to your topic and links back to the concept you're discussing, and there will be this great flow that makes absolute perfect sense to us, and that's really what we want to see. Only a couple more slides, and these ones are really, really quick, so apologies for going a couple of minutes over. Extensions: if you do need an extension, your ELA can grant you one for 48 hours. And we will then advise you via email if that's been granted. If you do need extra time, so more than 48 hours, it must go to our coordinator, Beck, and you need to get an extension request form from the student portal, and this goes through exactly how, and then Beck will get into contact with you. Please try and avoid leaving it until the day before the assessment's due to ask for a 48-hour extension. We appreciate sometimes things pop up, and you can't sort of make that call any earlier. But if you know that something's come up and you are delayed, and those extra couple of days will make a big difference, contact your ELA as soon as possible. It reduces your stress immediately. Once you know you've got that extra 48 hours, you're all sorted. One thing I will say though, be really careful with asking for an extension request for this task, because not long after we need to get straight into assessment 2, and this is your group task, and you really don't want to be holding your group up simply because you didn't manage to meet your deadline for 1B. So I would really, really strongly consider avoiding a 48-hour extension if you can, or if you have requested one, please let your group know that you're a couple of days behind in getting onto assessment 2, because assessment 2 will hit you quicker than you know, and it will be due before you know it, and you've really got to, you owe it to your group to make sure that you're communicating and getting on board with those tasks, because those deadlines will be super tight. So I thought that was worth mentioning. Of course, if there is a valid reason, go for it, but really try and work as best you can to avoid it, simply because it will have a flow-on effect to the next assessment. I think there's only a couple more slides to go. Just wait for the next one to load because it's taking a very long time. Okay, check the rubric. It is a holistic rubric, so it is so important to check the pass mark first, because that's the basic dot points you need. And what you will find with the higher grades is that the difference is your level of analysis, your level of critical reflection on the assessment topic and how you've structured your work, okay, as well as the overall academic strength. So if you tick all of the boxes and you get all your definitions, you address all the key criteria, you'll probably come out somewhere with a pass. To raise yourself to those next levels, it's really important you start to break down what it is that we're looking for, and it really will focus on that critical evaluation and analysis, so use of comparative language rather than just describing points. We want to see some higher order thinking. We want to see what it is that you really think are the key reasons for education to be changing. And, you know, are those things good? Are they not so good? If you've got any questions about the rubric, please ask in the discussion board threads. They are a tricky rubric because although they list the points, they don't go through in as much detail as a more prescriptive rubric. So they're a really good one to keep up your sleeve for use in the classroom. So maybe sort of take a look at this and see how it's structured and consider this when you're actually in the classroom. Only 6 minutes over and I think we're on our last slide. Any questions? I appreciate that I might have raced through some of that. I think the most important thing though is making sure you take your work back to the essay question and make sure you start by addressing the question, each of your key points goes back to the question and you finish by addressing that question. If you can do that, load your essay up with some good source support, some key points, some strong points, and finish off your conclusion with a powerful statement that really just smashes out the answer to the question, and we will have fabulous essays. So looking forward to seeing how you all improve, because we've really tried to give you as much feedback from A1 or 1A, sorry, as we could, because we want you to understand where the common areas were that we saw areas to improve. I think that's probably the last point I want to make. You might have got a really, really good mark for 1A, but make sure you take on board as much of this information as you can, because some of the points you may have just fluked or you weren't even aware that you did it. And when you come to do it for 1B, you might not realise that you haven't done it this time. So really think carefully and make sure you go back over what we've done to ensure that you know exactly what's expected for this next task. Alrighty, if that is everything, I think we are done. 7:08, that's not too bad. I think some of the others went for a good 20, 30 minutes over, so we did all right. So make sure you ask any questions on our DBs and make sure you get going with this task. If you've got nothing else to do on your consolidation week, then maybe spend a bit of time getting ahead so you don't come back in a mad panic to get it finished. And I wish you all the best. So thanks everyone for coming tonight. It was a small group, but a really, really positive, well-prepared group. You had some great responses, so thank you.